Welcome to Be Held's podcast, What's Your Story, where lyrics are more than just words. I'm Giselle Inez, your host, a licensed mental health counselor and model, guiding you through the journey of self-discovery and authenticity. Join me as we explore the heart and mind of an artist. This podcast is a safe space where your vulnerability is your superpower.
How would you want to define your legacy? If you were to look back on, on your life, well, how would you define that? What would you want people to know you as?
Yeah, so
Or remember
I
you?
think it's a really great question because when I hear that question, it really boils down to my values and like my purpose, and if I'm in alignment with my purpose. And this may seem really simple, and the old me would have said like, oh, I'm gonna be super famous and everyone's gonna know my name and I'm gonna change the world, right? But if I really had to like connect to who I am and what matters to me the most, it would be for me to be loved and to love. To love and be loved is so important to me, and if I can continue meeting people in this world and showing them what it is to be loved, to receive love, and to give love, I believe that's how I would want to be remembered in this life.
When I got into music, it was a form of therapy. It was a form of just working through problems. But you reach a point where you gain a little notoriety here and there, and then you feel like, yes, I want to die a rock star. I want people to remember me as a great, but and I want to. I think the biggest thing, the biggest insecurity I had, is to shove it in bullies' faces at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of the motive originally, was with this legacy thing. As the chorus repeats over and over again, I want to build a legacy. I want the world to envy me. I will never fall into the trap like others, leaving what they dreamed. I've forgotten why originally I had set myself for this journey, and the true underlying message of what we're going for. I think
It's investing that energy into trying, that you have to be open to saying like, I'm going to learn something from this. It's not a waste. And I think a lot of times we have to be mindful of that. Like our initial thought could be like, oh, it's just a waste. I know I'm not going to like it, versus let me just try and I will gain something out of this. I may not know right away what I've gained. Maybe I'll recognize it in a year or two. But like, I think that's worth it still.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is a question that everyone experiences in their life, and we're human beings. We're here for a finite amount of time. When we look back at everything, what impact did we have on life? What did we do? How do people view us when we're no longer here? I think that's what I wanted to capture with this song. And this, been a huge fan. I mean, a lot of the songs are stories. That's kind of the whole concept of the album, is book chapters, and these are chapters of my life. But out of all the songs, this is like the storytelling song. I think concept of the album being chapters of life and biography of the life. This kind of encapsulates kind of the whole biography, Spark Notes version, into one song, and each verse is a certain point of life. So I wanted to highlight different perspectives of life. So the first verse being the perspective of being a kid. The second verse kind of being a perspective of being an adolescent. The third being high school. Fourth being college, and then on, because still a lot to learn, still a lot going on in life. But I think kind of the whole concept of reflection, it's really cool to kind of just look back and trying to remember how we viewed life in these stages.
Yeah, that's powerful.
And a common theme I always had was being angry at the world for some reason and kind of pushing through that. When it came to wanting how I wanted to view my legacy, I just think, as we were talking about earlier, I did it out of insecurity. I wanted to use that anger as fuel to become this great person and people to bow down before me. And just looking at that at a bully perspective, you're not breaking that cycle then.
Right. You're continuing
then
it.
you just become the person you didn't want to become.
Right.
Or proposed against. Yeah. And
because what's happening is you're being fueled from pain. Because if we really think about it, bullies are fueled by pain.
Exactly.
And what you're describing is someone who, like, your motive is like to prove these bullies wrong, but then eventually you end up also just being fueled by pain too.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. And there's so many cycles we experience in life. Not all are bad, but there are definitely, and this comes with generational traumas, there's so many factors to it. But one of the most jaw-dropping albums I heard, and I love all his works, are Kendrick Lamar. He's always been one of my biggest inspirations for how vulnerable he is as a person, and how much that hit me. It's personally hard to relate about a lot of the concepts because growing up in Compton and how different the world is, but I really, really appreciated how he brought us into that world. For people that don't experience it and don't know how crazy that life is, really cool that he's able to share that with others. And the album I personally related to the most was Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, his most recent project. I think we talked about it in some previous episodes, but the concept of being I choose me, I'm sorry, how powerful of a line that is. And all the controversial things, and he was canceled for a little bit for Auntie Diaries or some of his songs, but how vulnerable he is about sharing this perspective of not understanding and talking about all the traumas he experienced, no matter how hard it is to talk about these things. But he was, for one of his storytelling songs, for example, it ends with his daughter being proud of him, and his daughter essentially saying you broke the generational curse. There are ways to break these patterns.
Yeah.
And that boils down to you. It's like we were talking about. It's do you want to become the next bully?
Right.
Or do you want to learn to heal from that, and generationally, like, by making that change, you just make the world a better place.
Mm, absolutely, because what you're sharing, what I'm hearing is, no matter the adversities that you go through, like how you respond is what matters. And are you going to respond from like who you truly are as a person, out of like kindness and compassion and generosity, and like seeing that person, that they're coming from a place of pain and anger, and you're not taking that personally.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing that person as like someone who's really hurt,
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't know how to connect with people in a space of love
Mm-hmm.
and compassion. And if you recognize within yourself of like, okay, but that's not who I am. I'm not a person that wants to hurt other people, cuz hurt people hurt people. And when you recognize that, like, I may be a hurt person, but I want to respond with kindness and compassion. And I think that's what's really important, to have your anchor.
Yeah.
Like, who am I? And if I respond in this way, is that really me? And that can be very different than like from your emotions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because when you're coming from a space of asking yourself, like, is that really me? You're asking from a space of, is that what I value? Is that, does that align with my morals and who I am as a person? Versus, yeah, feelings of anger and resentment and shame and guilt are all real feelings. However, you don't have to identify with that and react. When we're responding, we're coming from a place of who we are. When we're reacting, we're coming from a space of letting our emotions take the wheel. So when you're reacting out of anger, that's not who you are, right?
No.
That's just an action, a behavior. And if we allow ourselves to see ourselves in that way and other people, I think we would be in a world that's way more compassionate and loving.
Exactly.
To feel seen and to be heard.
And I think that's an important thing to bring up. How important it is to understand each other.
Mm.
I've always hated, I got this from Moist Critical, but I've always hated the word debate.
Mm.
And I've always hated the concept of a debate.
Right.
Because you have your perspective, they have their perspective, and what you're getting out of a debate is you're trying to manipulate that person into being like having your perspective. You're
trying to influence them.
Influence. I like addressing kind of uncomfortable topics as a conversation, because then you're not enforcing your views on that person, but you're helping them understand how you view life.
Yes. Like, this is not a space of like who's wrong or right, or who's more right. Right.
Exactly. And there's just so many things in life, especially that have definitive sides to it.
Yeah.
And why can't we talk about like the in between?
The gray area.
There's so much gray area in things, and
I don't even know if I want to call it the gray area. It's the area of unlimited possibilities, different trails that we can all go on. It's not just one destination or the other.
Because it's really hard. I mean, that's a very hard lesson to learn. Is just like, been bullied a fair share amount of times, but instead of viewing it in a way like, I want to hurt this person when I've built myself up, instead of viewing it that way, like I said, kind of going back to understanding just why are they like this? What's causing them to be like this? And I feel like if you flip the narrative on that, you know, you'll realize, like, I can't blame anyone, you know, really, for that, how they view life, because you don't know what brought them to be the person they are.
I'm trying not to paint it as a picture of like it's so difficult, because I believe that when you give yourself permission to believe like, oh, it's that simple, it's that easy, it can be. And so it's simple. You have to remind yourself that we're all human, and we're complex people. And when you remind yourself that other people are human too, you're not justifying their behavior. For example, like that bully,
No.
you're not saying like, oh, they're human, I should forgive them. It's like,
Mm-mm.
they're human and they are going on with their life in this specific way that really hurts other people, and it hurts me. And they're not being themselves. They have like a blanket of pain and sadness over them. So you're not really seeing who they are. And maybe that's a good picture to put if you're in a situation where you're feeling a lot of anger towards certain people in your life. Like, why are they like this? Or not even like, why are they such a jerk? You know, maybe seeing them as like there's a blanket over them of anger and sadness and frustration. And if they're not allowing people to see who they really are, then you have to see them as like, okay, they just have a barrier, a guard up. And maybe I'll never get to really know who they are. And that's okay.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Right? Like, I can just accept that this is how they want the world to see them, as like someone with a blanket over, and they're scared, they're angry. These are the feelings that they're letting dictate their life. But what's important is that you came to that realization and you didn't see it as like a personal attack. It's like that person's blanket is on, and I hope you know what I mean? It's like kind of hard to put into words. I'm trying to paint that picture for someone to see it more tangibly. Because like feelings are so abstract that it's like, and I'm a visual person. So if you're a visual person like me, I need to put it in a picture to understand it.
I agree with that. And that all just boils down to like, you can't judge a book by its cover. You can't, you know.
And I think it goes back to legacy, right? Of how you want to be remembered and how you want to remember other people. And personally, I want to remember people from how they viewed the world, and like how they overcame their adversities and their obstacles. Yes. And how they still were able to be kind and loving and compassionate no matter how difficult their life was and is. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, that's a really important perspective to look at, especially because it's hard in the moment. It seems like when nothing's going right, there's no one to turn to, but there's always that kind of duality in life. Say you're at the top, there's always one step from bringing you down a level, you know?
Yeah.
But to flip that perspective also, you know, kind of fighting through adversity, like you said, there's always going to be that person that brings you out of that as well. And you just have to be aware of both. It's important to be humble and gracious when things are going well. but it's important also to have hope that things are going to get better when things aren't going well. And it's important to recognize both stages, because life can give and take at any moment.
Yeah. The legacy is like being a human, being a human being, not a human doer,
Exactly.
right? Like,
That's what we forget, I feel like, especially nowadays. And I really like, I'm still a kid, but I really feel for younger and younger generations, because life has just become more and more like machine like.
hmm,
Um, and older generations, I think, have a harder time understanding how different life is. And not only that, but I feel like kind of boils down to understanding, instead of older generations being compassionate towards that viewpoint, they kind of express how hard their lives were,
mm,
rather than, understanding what their kids are going through.
being curious.
Being curious, exactly. And it's not to say that's easy to do, especially when you're older in life, because your perspective is more fixated.
Mm.
But I always think it's important to be curious. And you should always be learning. I don't think there's any stage in life, and people I've spoken to, old and young, accomplished or not, however you view it from a societal perspective, um, people are always learning. I don't think there's a point in life where you've quote unquote achieved everything. I think every single day you should strive to learn something new.
Mm. I like that. When you said the last part you just said about like every day learning something new, what I've been practicing is, instead of saying like my best self, I'm now saying, I got this from somewhere, I can't remember, so I wish I could give them credit, but it was a quote. Instead of saying I want to be my best self, I now practice how can I show up as my favorite self, right?
I
And
really
like
like that.
when you shift to that perspective of like, how should I dress as my favorite self? Like, what should I eat as my favorite self?
Mm-hmm.
Like, who should I hang out with as my favorite self? And what should I be thinking and listening to and yada, yada, yada as my favorite self? Like, how do I show up as my favorite self? Is, I think, brings you closer to who you are and
Yep.
closer to your legacy of how you want the world to remember you as, and also for you to remember yourself as. Like, as your
Exactly.
favorite self, not your best self, like your favorite self. And that favorite self can have, I don't know, a good day, bad day, like, and still show up as like who you want to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, there's two things I definitely want to say about that is, words.
Mm.
Words are everything, I think.
Yes.
How you view yourself, how you view others, um, really impact to a major scale how life works. Um, you surround yourself around people that say, I can't do this, I can't do that. Um, you're going to start believing that, whether or not you don't believe that.
Mm.
But you surround yourself around people that say, I can do this, I can do that. You're going to have a completely different perspective, a completely different outlook on life. And you may even say, like, environment doesn't have that impact, but there is so much that goes on subconsciously that we're not even aware of,
Yeah.
from a micro scale, that these small things really impact everything that
Yeah.
goes on.
Absolutely. That is life itself, like where you are, your environment. And
Yeah.
it's interesting that you say that because I agree with you 100%. And just to add one more thing, it's very telling who you're surrounded with at the moment because they're a direct, like, it goes back to to reflection, right? They're a direct mirror. And so it's, if you find yourself with people who are constantly saying things like, oh, that's impossible, I can't do that, that's too expensive, or that's too hard, you actually have to take that moment and say, is that me right now?
Yeah.
Am I that person who thinks and believes and moves in this way?
Mm-hmm.
And once you tap into that and ask yourself that, you will see how different your group of people around you will change very quickly. Once you start saying things like, oh, it is possible, I can do it. Because you will naturally surround yourself to the people who will mirror you in that way too.
Exactly. No, really well said. And just a brief story. This is for people that are very type A goal oriented. How important it is. I like kind of transitioning to what you had said. How important it is to not set such a high baseline on a daily basis. I think that
Mm.
is something therapy really made me realize is every single day I wanted to accomplish such unachievable goals,
Mm.
and how important it is especially that yes, I mean one thing is to make goals more achievable, but the second thing is not to beat yourself up for not achieving those goals.
Right.
To remind yourself, something I do in practice nowadays is I don't think I could ever stray away from goal setting. I think I need structure in life. That's just how
Yeah.
I work. Not everyone's different, but this is for the people that are more structured and goal oriented in life. Um, Instead of adding what I gotta get done in work, what I gotta get done at home, I had a third step. Um, what did I learn today?
Mm.
And what was I tried to do in one sentence? What was my story today? It could be good, it could be bad, it could be, anything regarding that. But it is so important to remind yourself, especially with the days where you feel like you've accomplished nothing because you've set such unachievable goals, but to remind yourself that I did do something today.
Mm.
Even if it's quote unquote the bare minimum, you still showed up.
Yeah. To piggyback to piggyback off what you're saying, it's so, in the world we live in today, we have such, and especially when you are when you're in a space of identifying your accomplishments with like self-worth, if you're in that stage heavily, um it's also okay. There is a time in your life where I hope for you to get into a space of like what's really important to you. And to go off what you're saying, I've now practiced um, making sure my foundation is strong and recognizing I could have so many systems in my life that could be so structured and organized that if my foundation is not strong, so my sleep, if I'm not sleeping well, if I'm not feeling well physically, like health wise, like my basic needs need to be met first.
Mm-hmm.
And so my goals now are, did I take my vitamins today? Right? Like I'm now spraying magnesium on the bottom of my feet to get better sleep. And if I'm able to get those two things done, it's like, okay, then I'm able to get the tasks that I need to get done the next day. Right? So, like, it may sound so small to people of like, oh, drinking water, that's going to solve my chaotic life. It's like, no, but what you're doing is building a strong foundation so you are capable of um, achieving that task you wanted to get done the
Really
next
well
day.
said. Yeah. Atomic Habits, for example. I mean, it's just there is. I'm a firm believer. There's always ways. No matter how big, how monumental the task is,
Mm-hmm.
there's always ways to break it down to an achievable, or even like a very micro scale. And like you said, even if you're making these small improvements, like drinking water, even like going to the gym for like 10 minutes, 15
Yeah.
minutes a day, going for a walk,
Yep.
just getting an extra hour of sleep. All these little factors
Are
add into
big.
a big impact.
Yeah, I see it as like if you are a house, if your foundation and your floor is not set,
Yeah, exactly.
you are going to be falling in your own house all the
And
time.
it is really important to figure that foundation out.
Yeah.
That comes before everything else. You can't do anything else if that's not
Right.
established.
And so, going back to legacy, it's like you have to meet your own foundational needs in order for you to go after what your heart is calling for. I really believe in that. Like, if you're not in this space of, if you're not genuinely healthy within yourself, it's going to be a difficult path to follow. And you may not even know where that path is. So you really have to start building that strong foundation in yourself. Thank you for listening and being a part of the Ripple Effect of Empathy on Be Held's podcast. What's your story? Together, we can continue to create a world filled with genuine connections and heartfelt stories. Click the link below to continue this transformative experience.